we will hand over to a panel now on what? Better than? Guess what? Artificial intelligence, and of course, simplifying and making Europe more resilient. And Aura, how can I say? Is it Finland? It's I don't know what else to say then. You have been a dear ally and welcome so much. Alberto from my team will basically facilitate, please be seated, will facilitate this panel. I also want to welcome on stage Alessandros from the Deputy CEO of PPC, Jeremy Rollingson from Microsoft, Felicitas Riedel, I don't know if I said it rightly, but the Director of Innovation and Competition for the Department of European Investment Bank. It's very long. Hi, good to see you again. And last but not least, Alberto Di Felice, who will navigate through this panel. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, wonderful. So this is about how Europe can win the tech race using AI. Okay, so we've heard a lot about AI. We know that for those of you who are still following how well we're doing on the Brussels effect, we have this thing called the AI Act, where we are very privileged because we're the very first continent where we are regulating AI comprehensively. And we also have a whole agenda now with the new commission that's about deployment, making sure that we actually are able to use the technology. There's a whole AI continent, supercomputers, apply AI strategy that will be coming up. So let's look at the toolbox that we have and what measures are more effective, would be more effective to do it right. So before I go into it, maybe I can start the poll right away. You know we have polls at Digital Europe events, so you can go to Slido. You probably see a QR code that will take you there, both online and here in the room. And the polling question is, what is the biggest factor Europe needs to focus on now to win the global AI race? 4 options. Accelerating real-world AI deployment and adoption. Simplifying regulation and cutting red tape. Strengthening public-private partnerships and investment, or attracting and retaining top AI talent. Please vote. We'll be going through the results as the panel moves on. So, Aura, as I said, we have the AI Act. It's been a major milestone of your predecessors in the past term in the European Parliament. It's a big law. Let's assume we didn't hear much about simplifying the AI Act from the Executive Vice President. We have some suggestions in our papers. But let's assume we have the AI Act. We want to make it work as best as we can. We want to make sure that it goes to one of the objectives that originally the Commission had for adopting it, which is that it's going to make the rules clearer for everybody to know what it takes to comply and have safe AI systems on the market. How do we make sure that we make this law a success and that it benefits the European economy, competitiveness for our big European companies that we all want to have?
Yeah, thank you for having me here today. I have a very different approach than my fellow Finnish colleague earlier here today. I'm not a fan of AI Act. I'm not a fan of many digital rules that we have enforced or we try to enforce in the EU right now, because I also disagree with Anu Bradford that this should be the best possible export product that the EU has, regulation. Come on, guys. So if you want to win this race on AI, what it actually requires is data. What it requires is money, talent, single market, and companies who have the hunger to grow, and politicians who allow them to do that. We need to allow our companies to also take risk. And that's something where we went wrong in the EU. Because now we are trying to eliminate all risks possible with ex-ante regulation, with AI Act, 300 pages of law that not even the best lawyers, sorry guys, can read. And then we try to make a code on conduct, like Virkkunen is saying, that we simplify, but actually even that failed to simplify because it went beyond the original law. And now our companies are even more confused how to comply, and our big companies will not even sign that. So do you really think that this is a success story, Europe? It's not. We need to really now take a stand and hold the Commission accountable, that we will enable ourselves to use more data, and also make sure that American companies doesn't export our data for free from the EU, the United States, who doesn't even respect anymore their own rule of law, and they are not a reliant partner anymore. So big questions on the table. And in the parliament, the political will, I hope, among my colleagues will be that we will make these big digital champions happen in the EU that Breton was trying to make, but I just think that he went wrong, and now we need to really go to a different direction, and it really means deregulation. Get rid of these words of omnibus and simplification and going around this word of deregulation. Let's start with the GDPR, it comes next year, and let's try to really simplify now the AI Act.
Okay, wonderful. Deregulation, a very bad word. Okay, Felice, let's talk about money. I think you're the right person to talk about money. We have a lot of surveys from Digital Europe, but other trade associations will tell you that we're not doing great on investment in Europe, particularly tech investment, which we know from Draghi in particular has been a key reason why we've lost competitiveness in the past 20 years. And one of the reasons why investors and companies say they're not investing, it's probably not the main reason, but it is a big reason, is that there's a lot of regulation. The regulatory environment is not making a business case that's clear and sexy enough for companies to decide to invest in Europe as opposed to other places. There's a lot of things around this. There's incentives elsewhere. There's stuff that's beyond regulation, energy prices. So if you were to talk to, the next investors in the European tech scene in Europe, existing companies, big companies, small companies, startups, scale-ups, why would you tell them they need to invest in the future of Europe as opposed to going somewhere else?
It's an excellent question, and I think I would like to put a slightly different view of what you said. I think I agree to a large extent what you said, but on the flip side, to have regulation in place also can be an enabling measure, because at least it gives some clarity and some framework for investors. And what we see from our perspective is the term of ethical AI, and for that, that requires a certain risk categorization, or at least a certain type of framework, and I think that's where Europe is good, and that's what can attract as well companies in the AI space into Europe. Another important part I want to say is that we still have excellent universities that are able to produce the talent that is required to also go forward in achieving the goals of AI or in general digitalization. We need to continue to invest in it and to foster it, and also to reskill maybe some of our existing workforce in order to further deploy it. We do have access to the necessary funding. So there are different financial instruments, but also different blended facilities, grant lending schemes available to ensure that Europe will, I have to say, will become competitive again. I think in certain areas we have lost it. But also where we need to look into is that Europe is strong in having public-private partnerships, and this is something that we can also continue to further exploit, and this can also be a reason for private investors to come to Europe to exploit it. We have challenges that my colleagues have approached, and I think they are important to tackle, but I think in particular, given currently the geopolitical situation, that we should see that as a huge opportunity for Europe to attract as well companies from abroad or from the US, precisely to offer access to our talent, our funding tools, but also our slow, but at least more clear path forward.
Very good. Okay. You mentioned geopolitical, and there's not a panel anywhere these days that doesn't mention that word, of course, at some point these days. So, Jeremy, of course, you're in the maelstrom of geopolitical tensions that we see right now. Europe is a big market, but you guys are investing everywhere. As a matter of fact, I think we should remind people that I think for both European and American companies, we are each other's biggest markets, customers, and partners, right? So it's a very relatively tense situation right now, I think we can say. So right now, like if you look at the future of where Microsoft is investing, from everything to R&D and to product investments and partnerships, how do you see the outlook for Europe specifically?
Well, thank you for the question, and I want to be amongst the more optimistic voices, perhaps. There is a lot of instability. I think we've recognized that with some of the recent announcements we've made to highlight the partnership and commitments that we have to Europe. We've been here for over 4 decades. More than 30% of our business, more or less, comes from Europe. Optimistically, we also have a lot of customers in Europe of all sizes that are really excited about AI. They have questions. Some of them have concerns. But it's a huge market, and there is that talent that exists here. There is that desire to be successful, not just in Europe, but around the globe. So we're making additional commitments on top of the investments that we've made, and you mentioned some of the investments that reflect, I think, the importance of our business. Just within the past 18 months, we've invested over 20 billion across 15 different European countries in infrastructure in particular. We have announced recently that we plan to expand that by 40% in the next 2 years. We'll have close to 200 data centers across Europe, or cloud operations, by 2027. That's a significant investment, and these are not built on wheels. So we talk about dependencies. I think we're just as dependent on European success and our customers' success as some may feel they're dependent on certain players. I think we provide startups in particular a lot of opportunities in that space. And we like to talk about a technology stack, and you can simplify that a bit. And there's infrastructure, there's platforms, and there's applications. And where I think we would align with the Commission is where the opportunity is around AI adoption, AI deployments. If you consider this to be the general purpose technology that I think it is, and I think we're going to increasingly see it become, those that are most successful in deploying this are going to be the ones that benefit the most. We want to play our part in that, and we're seeing customers get excited. Startups can host, whether it's their models or applications, on our cloud and have immediate access to global customers all around the world. It's one of the best ways I think we can help European players of all sizes reach new markets, kind of like having something that appears on a store shelf everywhere around the world, especially when you're thinking about the ecosystems that come up. There is a lot of geopolitical volatility, and I think we've recognized that, and we're using our voice on the other side of the Atlantic to call for more dialogue, and I want to be optimistic that we're seeing hopefully some green sprouts of that, and we're going to stay along for what, could be a bumpy ride. I understand there's a lot of concerns in that space, but we're trying to lean in where we can with our voice on both sides of the Atlantic and demonstrate our commitments with more than just words, but some of those numbers that I mentioned, some of the recent announcements we made to provide a bit of stability amongst that geopolitical volatility with the commitments we make to our customers' data. Just over an hour ago, hot off the presses, we announced a European security program highlighting our commitments to European cybersecurity. We're going to continue to lean into that space and call for that dialogue on both sides of the Atlantic.
Very good. I'm going to delay the ping pong a little bit if I can. I'm going to go to some of the vertical use cases that we desperately want to see emerge and where Europe has very strong players across the value chain. One of them is energy. So PPC is one of our latest members. Very, very happy that you guys joined Digital Europe, and you're a big player in energy in Greece. And how is AI deployment and uptake going specifically in energy? What is your assessment of the current situation? How do you think the situation is going to evolve in this 5-year cycle, let's say?
So again, it's great to be here. To your point, 2 elements. If we look at AI in general, clearly everybody recognized, we also heard a few words earlier, we don't use enough and we still need more. So I think that's a normal sort of assessment that anybody has. In the energy space, we are on the lagger side. We weren't the early adopters. It's not an industry that was attuned to technology. It's not fully digitized. So there are some sort of barriers in terms of uptake. But I want to flip this on the other side, leaving aside the geopolitical, I think some form or manner will get to a resolution. But it is a call to action. AI for us is not a technology like everything else we've had before. For us, it can and will play a step change in how we do business. For us, and personally me, I spend most of my time working and navigating through these incremental changes that are happening every day in AI with one single objective. How do I rewrite, ground up, the operating playbook of the company? It has to be written with AI at the core. It is no longer an option to use parts of AI here or some of that technology there or digitize something in some other area. It is a holistic 360 rewriting how we do business. So in our case, it's how viable can we become? How competitive can we become? It is clear AI has all of those elements for us to get the job done. This is a very difficult task at hand. The first thing you actually will recognize is the company itself has a challenge to comprehend what's happening in the AI space. It is so fast, it is so quick, it's announcements every day, and the evolution is at a pace which every week you get new capabilities which are radical enough to change the way you do business. It requires a constant focus. But I think it's important that everyone, whether you're in the private sector, in the public sector, even if you are self-employed, you really need to pay attention. It is skill that needs to be developed. It is new operating models, new ecosystems. It is a new world out there. We have been very successful so far because approximately 5 years ago, when we came to manage the company, we were what you would traditionally say an analog company. We were paper-based. We understood that we would need to digitize, so basically data, which is at the core of what AI is. You don't have data, you might as well not have a discussion on AI. Solving that problem and getting all the data that you need, get it clean, get it in one location that you can basically work with it, is a task in itself. This is something that everybody should have already finished with as we speak today. Anybody who hasn't, they have a tall order of work in front of them. And that's the first thing that they need to focus. Luckily for us, it took us about 3 years, we got this done. So in the last couple of years, we now have the enabling elements in place for us to do that next transition. So we are decompartmentalizing the business. We're going down to its initial building blocks and looking at components. It's not business process design, it's not engineering, it's not efficiency. It is a complete rewrite. And the value chain will follow in one form or another. Technology is there. Partners are there. Skill set is there, not in the size that we want, but I think for Europe, it is a great opportunity to be a leading player, if not the leading player in the world, by adopting AI, rewriting its business models, and taking full advantage today, what is going to be how we will do business tomorrow.
Thank you, Alexandros. Rewrite. It's quite comprehensive as an answer to my very simple question, if you will. So, all right, you had a reaction, but before you react, I'm going to ask you a question. Okay, so we've heard about investment. So the scale of the investment that we need, according to Draghi, is 800 billion. So that's a lot of money. We're having big discussions about reforming the multi-annual financial framework, our investment programs, all the discussions that we're having now on gigafactories and apply AI. The money will come from that pocket. The EIB is putting its foot in the door and collaborating, actually complementing, I think, what's coming out of these funds. But the reality is there's not a lot of money to use in the first place. And one of the things that we'll have to continue to do probably is also try to attract investment from outside Europe. If you think about the other...
Can I react now?
Not yet. I don't know if people can hear me, but it doesn't matter. You know, it's good for you. One of the things, if you think about our... can I call them bad neighbors? Thank you. Thank you. I have wonderful panelists. I love them, the support I get. If you think about the partner that we're all talking about these days, for example, one of the key goals that they have is to drive, it's me, it's not the microphones, It's about driving investments in their geography, let's call it. I want to stay as anonymous as possible. It's not about blocking. Doesn't matter if you're European, American, or Japanese. What matters is that you invest locally. You make locally. So how do you see Europe sort of balancing that line and walking that line?
Well, there are a couple of things. First of all, I would say that when people ask, like, how do I get EU subsidies? And I'm a business, I always think, like, why do you need subsidies if you are a business and you have a good idea? Private capital will follow you. So how I would use EU money more is that I would use it as a seed money. And, like EIB is doing with InvestEU program, for example, you put €1 from the EU budget, you leverage 17, 18 times from the private sector for good projects that would actually fly, So that's a good way of spending EU money compared to what we do with the cohesion funds and all these subsidies that we are so used to. So that's one thing. The second thing is that, when you hear one more politician in the EU say that capital markets union, that's top notch. We need to make that happen. You have heard Dombrovskis, Jyrki Katainen, Jean-Claude Juncker, von der Leyen said that 15 years, right? What has happened? Literally nothing. When you ask from Prime Minister of Romania or Prime Minister from Finland, are you ready to harmonize insolvency law in Europe? Oh, no, you don't touch that. That's in the national competence. Okay? Are you ready to harmonize taxation? No, you don't touch that. That's in the national competence. Okay, Denmark, are you ready to open your pension fund for defense financing or investments in Bulgaria? No, you don't touch my pension funds. So what do I touch then? How do you create a capital markets union if you are not ready to move on anything? So these are the facts. So I would not like to see these or hear these high-level speeches about these things without action. So you need to always ask a politician how you do that. And then one thing I would really like to thank Microsoft, because I think that their example, that they froze the email accounts and access to their services by the International Criminal Court's chief and staff, that shows us Europeans that we need to take action, to take European data sovereignty to our own hands and build our own European Microsoft. These American companies will never become Europeans. Never. No matter how many data centers they are building to this continent. We need to take action now because this case just proved us that they can do that. And EU institutions and many of us are reliant on these American companies and they can cut us off tomorrow. Talking about geopolitics, talking about European sovereignty, these are such an important things that we need to act today.
Okay, wonderful. Again, this has been a constant to the past few sessions I moderated for Digital Europe. It gets very tense. I'm going to give you the word, Jeremy, but I want to avoid a ping pong. But I'll get to you. Okay, we have 25 minutes left, and we can maybe continue the discussion in a very relaxed manner. So felicitas. We've talked about risk aversion from policymakers from Aura, right? There's a lot of nice talk about, there's a lot that we can do in Europe, harmonize, etc. But when it comes to it, there's still quite a lot of resistance. So that's a political problem. We also know that's been a constant probably since, in the past 20 years particularly, but that's probably a cultural constant, that also risk aversion on the part of European businesses to some extent has been a problem in terms of embracing digitization and contributing to that to the competitiveness loss that we've had with respect to the US and China. So how do we fix that?
It's a good question. If it would be so easy, I guess we would have fixed it. Unfortunately, it's a long way to go. I think we should start with a mindset shift. So to come from compliance first to innovation first, I think that's a very important step. But also to have a cultural change by embracing failures. To say failures are a stepping stone to learn and to improve. And instead of being earmarked forever, you have failed and we have to put you aside. I think that's something we can, for instance, learn from the US. Otherwise, I think it's important as well for us to look into the reward that you get. So the higher the risk, the higher the reward, and also to use, like the point you made before, the subsidies more as enablers for higher risk. Of course, it should not be that throw money somewhere where you don't believe it, but if you believe there is a potential that this technology can succeed, it's breakthrough, and it can become a game changer, we should be willing to invest the money and to go for it. And this is particularly relevant for offshore wind, for example. It's very expensive. At that time when we started it, it was high risk. Nobody knew that it would work. But I think it did Europe very well that this risk was taken, and now this is a technology where Europe is in the lead. And we should be more trusting in ourselves if we have great ideas to go through with them. Another point is I believe we need to prioritize. So we should really be focusing on those investments where AI can really have a significant role. And this could be in sectors such as energy, manufacturing, or health, where really it can be transformative. And the last point I want to do is we also need to look into different financial instruments where we can use certain risk-taking capacities to offer new solutions to address specific market failures.
Thanks a lot, Felicitas. So on that note, I'll go to the poll, Slido. This is also, by the way, where you can ask questions of our panel, which we'll be curating and asking if they're interesting. And the poll says that our success depends largely on accelerating deployment. That option leads with 41%. Second place for simplifying regulation and cutting red tape, which is a great segue for my question to Jeremy. Obviously, you have right of reply. But first, I'm also going to ask you a question. So this simplification bit, obviously, we heard it also from the EVP. It's coming. That there's a lot or very little that could happen there. How do you see this playing out? Because obviously there's a lot that influences how much companies are willing to invest. One of the elements of risk aversion, to me, undoubtedly, has been a very risk-averse regulatory system. Or I mentioned it as well, right? We started with AI regulation. First instinct is to protect from serious harm, which is good, all good and well, but it does have negative externalities, let's say. So how do you see that dynamic happening? And then, of course, you can reply to Aura.
Of course. Listen, I think, especially in the context of simplification, what we're really focused on is clarity, providing clarity to companies. And in the interest of providing clarity, everyone should be clear that at no point did Microsoft cease or suspend ICC court activities. That's just a fact. It's important that I know, amidst this geopolitical activity, every 48 hours, we have new dynamics. We have new things that are happening. It's hard to keep up with. I know it's been hard for my team and hard for many of our customers following that space. The policy environment can be very active there as well. And this gets back to your question. I think what we hear from customers, and I've said this on many, many panels, if European startups and firms need to hire lawyers to be successful at AI, that's not the best recipe for success when you're competing against counterparts around the world that are investing in engineers, architects, and the like. But clarity matters. You need to know up to what point you can compete. We have customers asking us questions about their AI deployments that it's hard to answer because the space is moving and there's ambiguity in some of those texts. So regulatory simplification is super welcome for many of those bodies, especially startups and others that want to have that clarity and may not have the resources that we do to hire lawyers and examine this with outside counsel views and the like, and have these dialogues based in Brussels and elsewhere. You see a lot of excitement for this when you get outside of Brussels in particular. We certainly see excitement from our European customers across the board, startups in particular. Where they get confused is when they can't understand the rules. And if you think of the AI Act in particular, standards have an important role to play in that context. Standards are supposed to be what provide the level of specificity so you can have that presumption of conformity. But if a compliance deadline is looming and there's no standard ready yet to meet that, or you risk kind of developing a compliance program on some of that ambiguity and then maybe having to revisit that when the standards ultimately emerge. Once again, that's a cost, especially for smaller firms where regulatory simplification could play a role. But I think clarity is what we're getting at. There's all the difference in the world between a 10-page law and a 1,000-page law. And if we need pages and pages to explain what we meant with the law, we might want to take some learnings from some of that.
Indeed. Okay. I want to go back again. A great example of that complexity is with the energy sector, right? The energy sector is a highly regulated vertical sector where you have vertical standards, you have vertical requirements that get updated every now and then. You have reporting requirements. You'll have the AI Act applying to you as a high-risk use case directly with those harmonized standards, et cetera. So how, what are the challenges there in terms of compliance that you see already, particularly when you look at AI, but I think more in general also on cyber, the things that we're looking at with this infamous or famous digital package that we're supposed to see. Do you see any potential for simplification there that could make your life easier?
In simple, the answer is yes. There are too many things out there which we have to monitor at any given point in time. We recognize, obviously, on the side of EU that there needs to be some sort of regulation. It cannot be completely unregulated. So from one perspective, what we try to do is to be active. So we know how to run the business. We know what we need. We are very actively working with other countries outside Europe and see how they actually do things. And we try to see how can we remain competitive. Because I think what Jeremy said very well is our competition is not only in country or in Europe, it is also with companies which are outside of the EU. So in order for us to pace ourselves correctly, we look at also what's happening outside. Then we try to bring these in the dialogue with the Commission and with the corresponding bodies. So we try to bring what are the things that we can actually implement, what we can conform, and what we think is an inhibitor for us to continue to execute and grow in the business. So I think it's a bilateral discussion. We know how to get the job done. We look at the technology. We try to get the positive aspects and bring them into the dialogue. The simplification is something that we welcome. I mean, a lot of the things that are expected to be announced, some of our positions are in there, which means they've been expressed. The combinational aspects, I think, are unique to each sector. So for us, there are areas there. For example, cybersecurity was not number one on our list. We didn't have the big looming issues of risk for critical infrastructure like us. Now it's elevated. So if you looked at our risk profile, that would probably rank somewhere in the middle. Now it's climbed up to the top. So again, this reprioritization, again, back to what Jeremy said, is something that we consistently have to monitor. But, I think as businessmen, we are aware what's going on. We can actually see all the things. I think we're good at assimilating these, but we will need to continue to work with the European Commission to make sure that we get the next version of what we need in place for our security and the security of our European partners and citizens. That's for us the number one priority. So get the job done, get it right to the favor of the nation states.
Okay, very good. Thanks. So iterate, but continue to learn and hopefully make those cycles a bit faster. Okay, wonderful. I'm done with the questions that I had prepared. So now we get to the questions that the audience wants to ask. There's one that's very interesting. Obviously, the geopolitical nature of our discussions these days makes this question beautiful. So, Ora, you mentioned this idea of the Eurostack, which is gaining traction, particularly here in Brussels, some capitals. But ultimately, what it says, I think it's a cry of pain in terms of making sure that we have more European champions active in Europe and on the global stage in the tech race. We call it tech race, and it is a race. The key question, particularly about the Eurostack idea, which wants to effectively replicate the entire technology in Europe, is first of all, is it really needed? Second of all, do we have the wherewithal and the economic might also to do it? And what does that play with respect to the complementary option of that, which is making sure that we have strong European players somewhere in the value chain that captures a good part of the value chain, but is active worldwide and can benefit from the global scale of having a big US market as well, starting from their European operations, having big Asian markets, etc. Where do we see that? And I'm starting with Aura, but you guys can all chip in.
Yeah, I need to say that I wanted to ask this yesterday from Sejourné also. With public procurement, that's the one thing, that concrete action we could take, that we should prefer European companies in a public procurement. Second thing, we need to rethink the data transfers agreement with the US, because they have been our trusted partner and ally, and we have a common data economy. But right now, what is happening in the US, are they still our partner and ally? Their minister is not even attending to a NATO meeting today in Brussels anymore. So we really need to rethink this and how we are handing our data to the US, how we are handing our data to China, which is a huge security threat. And no one talks so much as with the US, this data economy we used to have. I thought I would never say this. I worked for the American company, and I was all for data transfers agreement and common joint data economy. Right now, I'm not anymore, because I'm not blue-eyed. Europe needs to stand on its own, and it requires bold action, and that's why I am bold here today to try to push this. And it will require a lot of risk capital, and there I hope that the EIB will make the push. We politicians, our role here is to make sure that the capital flows seamlessly in the EU, because that's something that it is required. We also need talent. You know that only 4% of Europeans live and work in another country than where they are from in the EU. So we need to make people also move when there is an interesting company in Romania, in Bulgaria, so please also go there. So there are many things that we can do, and my role as a politician is try to enable. I don't want to see a tech company built by the European Commission. I don't want to see social media built by the European Commission, definitely not. What I want to see is these companies from Lithuania, Latvia, Romania building that, and politicians who will enable that and take those bold moves. That would be my message.
Okay, very good. Alexandros, I saw you had an immediate
Yeah, I just wanted to make a point. I'm all for Europeizing, if you like, a lot of what we buy from the US or anyone else or China. But we have to be very wary. It's from where I sit, if somebody came to me, similar to what happened in the telecommunication industry, and said, we're not going to be using this tech, we need something else, that is a massive cost which cannot be picked up from anyone. There is no way you can transfer technology from one site to another. It's not possible. What we need to, I think, consider is, in the value chain, where do we think we want to be European? And take a stake. I think that is something that, from a business perspective, we can take on as a challenge. We can look at which parts of our business we'd like to sort of base on European tech or European knowledge or European startups, and then we are part of a global ecosystem. So we are going to use components from other parts of the world, but not to the level that the dependency or the viability of the business is at third-party hands. So I'm all for being sort of autonomous and being detached from a wider ecosystem, but we have to be very careful. It has to be done at a balance where we don't put the business at risk, because here we're talking about how do we rewrite our playbook, how do we grow in the next century, for example. And in this case, I think it's finding the right balance.
Thanks a lot. Jeremy?
Just piling on, perhaps, I think you said that really well. I mean, these are ecosystems. And I would want to say, like, we're very excited about what our Latvian, Lithuanian, and Romanian customers are building on top of our AI solutions. And I also just would provide a word of caution. I don't think European companies would be better off if they couldn't transfer data to the United States. I don't think that would help competitiveness. I don't think that's what we're hearing from our customers. If you think of the competitiveness agenda and the opportunities in those ecosystems that you described, of course there are concerns, and of course these are dialogues that we have to have. But let's not lose sight of that goal. The excitement around AI and a general purpose technology with that, you're going to have technology and talent and data coming from all different sources, and that's normal. I think we want to make sure that we're providing our part in that, and I know what our customers are saying, and we're really excited about some of their excitement. And then I think we have a task at hand in making sure the legal frameworks are clear enough for them to be successful in that space.
Very good. You also remind me of that survey we did a few years back about data transfer mechanisms under GDPR, where we did it with Business Europe, and we surveyed 300 companies, which is a site of a good OECD survey, and based on those numbers, 2/3 of all companies transferring data to the US are actually European companies that do so with business partners and customers out of the US. So the economic impact is not easy to estimate as one-sided on just one part of the value chain, let's say. I'm going to end on one final question from the poll, and it's an awkward question because we've discussed how we can accelerate AI deployment, and the question is about, can we delay the AI Act? Would that accelerate AI deployment? I'm going to sort of leave it there. Who wants to react?
I
can react, but if you want to take the floor, I have many problems with the AI Act, don't get me wrong. But the thing is that we need also some market stability. And that's the thing. We cannot go back and forth. So maybe a little delay to get our act together, or the Commission to get their act together. But that being said, our companies need to know what they are now, facing. So I would not delay too much. Then we can review, we can do next things better. And one thing is that I really hope that the Commission will not propose anything on Digital Fairness Act or Digital Networks Act. And we definitely don't want to see the standard essential patents proposal coming back again, because that's a one proposal that tries to fix something on market that is not broken, and it's heavily lobbied by Apple and German car industry. And I know that Nokia will leave Europe if that happens. So let's be smart on that regulation from now on, but I would not delay AI Act too much.
Yeah, piled up a lot of stuff there. Thank you. Any other reactions on AI Act? No? We kind of all agree on the take? Wonderful. Well, thank you very much. I thoroughly enjoyed this geopolitical panel. It was also very civilized. Thank you very much. This is the end of our wonderful summer summit. I want to thank, in addition to my panel, of course, you all, the audience, as well as our sponsors, Microsoft and PPC, for making this possible. And now I'll close this, and please be reminded that there's refreshments outside, and we can continue our geopolitical conversations in a moment. Thank you.